Hey Todd, nice to see you. You have a beautiful background today. I love it. Um, I have my father's office background, but that's okay. Um, let's talk about something. I don't know what we're going to talk about, but you have an idea, and I want to hear about it, and I want to respond to it.
So what you texted me about, which is independent candidates running for the United States Senate, and you pulled a small thread of that conversation, but I think this is a one of the most undertold stories of the 2026 election cycle, which is that you have my math's not even going to be exactly right on this. Five legitimate and probably a couple other beyond that, but independent candidates running for the United States Senate with the support of the minor party in most of these instances, the Democratic Party. So you have scenarios in Montana, Idaho, Nebraska, South Dakota, and Mississippi. Those are the ones I'm tracking. I think there might be another one or two. Alaska, where strong independent candidates, all of whom, by the way, are military veteran, are running
All
for
of
the
them, all six of those would be military veterans.
all of whom,
Wow.
the ones
Okay.
I'm tracking. And again, there's
Okay.
always like independent candidates on the ballot, but they're not necessarily like considered serious candidates or legitimate or credible,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
or have organized campaigns. But these are like, and we can walk through the list. But people like Seth Bodnar, who's stepped down from being president of the University of Montana, running in Montana with John Tester and others' support as an independent candidate, just raised more money. I think the entire field combined is taking on an incumbent. Um, and it's a huge, huge undertold story because what happens if a few of these candidates win, they get to the United States Senate, and all of a sudden you have these independents who are choosing with whom to caucus and who are operating with a different incentive structure. Now, I think the assumption for a lot of Democratic voters and Democratic donors is like, we'll just be proxies for the Democratic Party. I actually don't think that's true. I think these people want to do something different beyond our broken political paradigm. They're all I mean, three of these candidates have had direct involvement, volunteer experience with Veterans for All Voters. So they're like committed to primary election reform. They're committed to system reform. They're committed to moving beyond the binary that no one is happy with, and they are campaigning on that message. And so it's and like the data says, like there's a lot of Republicans who like are never going to vote for a Democrat, and a lot of Democrats who are never going to vote for a Republican, but wide swaths of each population that are willing to vote for something that looks like it's beyond that. And so, yeah, dude, I'm super optimistic. I don't think lots of them are going to, I don't think, I know that they're not all going to win. I think a couple will. Dan Osborne almost pulled this off last cycle in Nebraska. He's running again. He's a labor organizer, blue collar leader who was in the Navy and and he's running without a Democratic opponent. So he's going to consolidate a lot of the voting base that just doesn't want to be with the incumbent Republican or the Republican establishment candidate. Um, and I think it's a huge story. So I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, we can get into it, but like, I think a few of these guys are going to go over the finish line. Oh, and this is the big point. If they get to the United States Senate and you live in a world in which there's 48 Republicans and 48 Democrats, all eyes go to the four independents about what's going to happen. So you don't have to win the majority of the seats to create the power structure in the United States Senate. You just need to be the couple, literally two or three or four who aren't like, immediately predictable as to what they're going to do. And all of a sudden they become the power center of the United States Senate and they make the rest of the game look predictable, small, irresponsible, frankly. So yeah, I am very excited about this. And I don't think it's really hit the zeitgeist in mainstream media or conservative media about the phenomenon that is unfolding and the fact that it's actually being led by military veterans.
I think this is super interesting, and you are way more the expert on this than I am. I want to I'm going to dump a little bit of what I know, and maybe this to sort of give a primer to where we are. You dove real deep, real fast. Let me widen this rabbit hole a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So I think from my experience, being at the age that I am, and you roughly are, we've experienced some independent candidates for the president, right? Ralph Nader, more prominently Ross Perot in a couple elections, who was siphoning off real votes from Democrats, Republicans, whatever, but the two institutions, the bi-party institutions. So um, the we currently have correct me if I'm wrong, 2 U.S. senators who are independents, both from New England. Neither one are veterans. We have Bernie Sanders, we have Angus King. Both caucus with Democrats, right? So for all intents and purposes, am I missing somebody?
Well, I was gonna say, I don't know. I'm not positive. I know Bernie Sanders is not a veteran. I don't know. I don't think Angus King is, but I'm not positive on that.
Okay. For the
And
record, we're not positive, but we don't think either one's a
yeah, I
veteran.
don't
Yeah.
think so. Yeah, yeah. And I think generally speaking, they do caucus with Democrats, but I think they also run a very different play in their own ways. It's not a
Yeah, and they're
centrist
well, they're
play.
very different places from one another. You're saying,
Yeah,
and the
yeah,
Bernie is actually potentially left of the establishment Democratic Party, and King is more what we're talking about, more of a moderate, middling independent. Then you have folks who have demonstrated being, but because they caucus with the Democrats, they've been counted more or less in some of the more controversial bills and hearings and votes. They've been kind of counted with the Democrats, and they actually that power play that you're talking about, that who are the 4 votes in the middle that make the difference, has actually fallen to moderate Republicans over the past few years. So Susan Collins from Maine, Lisa Murkowski from Alaska, um, and and maybe a couple others. And so that's interesting in that they've had like the cosplay of being an independent by being a moderate Republican. What we're talking about now is people who come in as genuine independents potentially, and each one I'm sure has a different flavor and a different politics and different policy positions on different issues. But we're talking about not just someone who's leans a little bit more this way or that way than their party. We're talking about someone who can sit in the middle, who can sit right in the aisle and say like, today I'm going to go this way and today I'm going to go that way. Potentially, and not one of them, but a handful of them potentially who could do then that together and could
yeah,
actually say, well, hey, what do we think?
yeah.
How do we can so what you have is states, and the states you're talking about who are running these candidates are actually, I'm just thinking about this out loud, all relatively low population states, right? Already have a ton of power just by having 2 senators, right? Like Montana or Idaho, or Alaska. Um, Alaska that has 2 senators but only earns 1 representative, right? Um, as well as Vermont and Maine, small population states. Um, Even more power for those constituents um, whose senator is now at the center of decision making. What I find most interesting is the veteran affiliation, right? And so that's what I want to dive into. So what I know, and you already told me more than I knew coming in. What I knew coming in was uh, Todd Achilles in Idaho is a
Yep.
veteran, and he now the Democrat in that race has dropped off, so it becomes independent versus Republican. Same thing more or less in Nebraska with Osborne, who you mentioned. The Democrat dropped out, and now it's going to become independent versus a Republican. So in both of those states, what we expect to see is those Democrats who would never vote for a Republican either don't vote or vote for the independent.
Hmm.
And if enough of them vote for the independent, plus any number of independent voters from anywhere, from left, right, or center, doesn't matter, then you start to amass polling data that tells you, hey, maybe this independent can win against this Republican candidate. Now you have in Montana a veteran independent and a veteran Democrat who's currently on the ballot, and
Hmm.
a Republican, and they're all 3 in the race right now. Many people have asked the Democrat or called for the Democrat to back out, but then the independent you mentioned is Seth Bodner. They that she hasn't backed out. She hasn't dropped out. As of now, as of our recording, she's going to be on the ballot in November, and that's a whole nother calculus. I don't have as much information about the other states, so I think from there it's like explaining what's going on. But I think in the context of that, I'd love to hear what you think about the fact that they're all veterans. How does that differ from Angus King and Bernie Sanders? How does that differ from how they're going to actually lead and govern and vote and they're not going to govern, they're going to represent, lead and represent and vote? How is that? How is it different because they're veterans, and why does it matter?
Yeah, so I think there's a few things here. One is there's a number of threads that are relevant. I have to highlight the fact that the Republicans that we deem as being in play, Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski on key votes, come from states with primary models that are evolved as compared to most states. So they have ranked choice voting in Maine. They have a top 4 election model in Alaska, that very much drives why they do what they do. So like, I think, I mean, part of like my, my editorial here is like, stop considering all the human variables and start considering the system variables. So it's like, like I can predict for you based on the primary election model of a state, the kind of candidate you will get in the general election. And I can predict to you based on the electoral map, like who's going to win in the general election, right? So like, it is not,
How we run our elections is going to determine the kind of candidates we get and therefore the type of people that we
it is
elect and
entirely,
state by state by state.
yeah. And Angus King and Susan Collins, I'm like, it is not just that there's something weird about Maine. I'm like, they have a different election model than Illinois, than Mississippi, than other states. Like Bill Cassidy did what he did because he lived in Louisiana, which is a top 2 election model, and he could flex some independence because it wasn't a closed primary state. Like so there's like a ton of nuance about like how like jungle primaries and top 2 models, top 4 models, ranked choice voting in the primary versus the general. But like I think the thing that people need to realize is it is the model of the election that determines the kind of politics and ultimately the kinds of politicians that you get. Like that's the takeaway. And like I think people they overweight personality, they underweight the system design. So we're here to like, let's talk about the system design because like it's actually kind of immaterial to me, like who wins this cycle in Nevada. Like I can tell you the kind of person and whether they will act independently based on what their incentive structure is in their next primary election. So I want to highlight that.
Would you say that the in the modern electoral system, especially in the states that don't have the types of voting innovation that you're talking about, the ranked choice, the open primaries, et cetera, would you say that more often than not, or at least too often than we want, the candidate and then the elected person in the elected office is actually filling a archetype rather than serving as an individual who has, hey, I have ideas. They're saying like, well, I was elected, so I need to do the things that were expected of me, and that means in my state, I need to run as far to the left or the right as humanly possible, so I don't lose voters. So I am true to my party. I'm the best Republican or the best Democrat that I could possibly be, whether or not it betrays my personal politics.
100%.
And because I need to be elected the next time.
Well, and here's the other thing. Yes, that's true. And it's all about expectation setting. So like if you ask voters in Alaska let's go to like Arizona, for example, what kind of politician do you want? Do you want a politician that looks across the aisle? Do you want a politician that can act on a bipartisan basis and create like policy wins? It's like the voters will tell you like, yes. When when Kristen Sinema did that as a Democrat, she was eviscerated. Like when John Fetterman steps out and is like, I actually don't want to go full orthodoxy on the Democratic Party because he ran the traps in a Democratic primary as a Democratic candidate. And like the D is like how he got there. It's what he's labeled as today. Like it comes as a like a violation, right? And like this is where you see so to me, and like this is why
So it would have been
Republicans,
more authentic if Fetterman had run as independent, but
it's all
probably
about,
in Pennsylvania he couldn't have won, so he had to choose one. And
there's no path to victory as an independent. We'll get back to why. There
yeah,
is in some of these states because they've created the ground conditions of like minor parties stand down, like be the only independent in the two-person race, and so that's the path to win. But it's all about expectation management. So if you come in as an independent and then you act independently, it's a total validation that voters love. If you come in as like, I won this Democratic primary on the basis that like I'm the progressive candidate in the race, and then you flip a switch and get there and decide to be moderate, like then voters are like deeply like violated and like mad about that. And like it's interesting because like Republicans hate Adam Kinzinger more than they hate Democrats. Like they hate him more than Nancy Pelosi, which is like mind blowing because it's about loyalty. And so I think the starting conditions of coming in as an independent are like wildly different than getting there and just acting independent because it's like you set up an expectation that like I'm here on my own terms and I got here on my own terms and I might choose to caucus with the party, but like, when Angus King like takes a wild vote or Lisa Murkowski, it's like it validates her brand as opposed to violates her brand. And so that's why I think it's so different. And that's where I think veterans coming in on this basis of like, I'm here to do America's bidding. I'm not here for, and by the way, my state's bidding. I'm not here as part of like Chuck Schumer, like Mitch McConnell, like apparatus, like keep my name out of your mouth kind of thing. Like, I think it's a very different ground game. And then again, like, folks with evolved electoral models, Maine, Alaska, other states that might go there, like that there will be power back to those states and those elected officials because they'll be seen as people that are sort of like determining what moves forward, what does not. So, um, yeah, it's not, I mean, it's not simple how this happens, but like I think we're living in this duopoly era where like people are wildly frustrated with the politics. Like Democratic voter approval rating of the Democratic Party is in the like teens. And same thing with the Republican Party. So it's like Democrats don't like the Democratic Party, Republicans don't like the Republican Party. They don't know how to get beyond it. And so, and then the last thing I want to say, because this is like people's mental model around independent candidates, they immediately go to presidential races and they immediately go to like Ross Perot capping out at 19%, whatever, right? So there it's like, oh, it's not possible. Well, that's preconditioned on a three-person race in which there's an independent and two major parties. And then you're right, it's not possible because people are like, if you're a if you're a reluctant Democrat, you're like, I don't want to. You start doing what's like known as like strategic voting. It's like I have to now think about like I actually want Chris Marvin, but if he's the independent in this three-person race, like I can't give Chris my vote because it's going to throw it away. I have to like go be with the Republican because like that's actually like like at the end of the day, like I need someone who I hate less to win, and so like I'm voting on the basis of like who am I most fearful of, as opposed to who do I like. Now, that's the whole point of ranked choice voting. You can like say who you like. You're not to like gain your vote. You just be like, I like this person the most. I like this person the second most, and then we get to a consensus. That's the whole purpose. So. But I think the notion that independents can win will get easily dismissed because there's not a mental model as it relates to the presidency, which by the way, like presidential elections, an entirely different beast than U.S. Senate elections.
So yeah, so the presidential election is like soccer. We talked about soccer before, right? The World
Yeah.
Cup, and so it's like you have your team, and you got to get on that bandwagon early, and you're going to bet. It's like you bet on one of them, right? Because you get one bet at the beginning. But if you were able to do ranked choice in the presidential, it would be like being a true bandwagon fan, where when your team loses in the quarterfinals, you take that jersey off, you throw on the jersey of the team that won, and say, "Hey, I was rooting for Brazil, but when Brazil lost, this France jersey fits well. Then when that France jersey doesn't work, you throw on the Spain jersey, and you're like, we won the World Cup." So I think that's their your ranked choice voting can work like that. I think the thing with the state, um, sort of the states who are doing their own systems of voting for their senators and their U.S. members of Congress. What has happened over the years is that people have the candidates themselves and then the elected officials have again moved as far and far and far to the fringes as they can because they want to be a better Democrat or a better Republican. It's like they're painting a wall and they keep getting the shade a little bit darker, right? Oh, if it's a little bit dark. We started with pink, but I want to make it darker red and darker red and darker red. Now it's burgundy and now it's what I like. And on the blue side, same thing, right? Like we started with a real sky blue and now we're down to this navy blue. And at the end of the day, you keep getting so dark that it turns black on both ends, right? Meanwhile, you have these independents who are like, or what about a wonderful shade of lavender? How
Yeah.
would we feel about that? That if you turn it this way in the light, it could look blue sometimes. And you turn it this way in the light, it could look red sometimes. But it is really that idea that like the farther and farther and farther you go out, the darker you get, that you are going to end up in black. I know that's just an analogy; it doesn't prove anything, but it feels to like describe what we've gotten to in some of these
Well,
politics
yeah,
for
and
those that
like
have to race to the end.
yeah, and like political science is called like the horseshoe effect, where it's like the further you go up and around, it's like you actually become like versions of the same thing. Like, I mean, I tell my Democratic friends, I'm like, you're about to have your MAGA moment, like because the structural design of your elections will yield to that just as it has in the Republican Party, and like, and so it's gonna look different, And to be clear, like my argument isn't like we need moderates. It's like, but what is
We
not
need a lot of
healthy,
things.
like we need a lot of things, but like the hope is like what we don't need is politicians who are solely worried, and this is like the Democratic Party right now is an abject fear of being primary, not from moderate, but from the left, right? And so like they're all going to have to sort of go full DSA agenda in order to not get primary. And the question is like, so you're going to kowtow to like a just numerically like a small percentage of your base because that's the vote. That's like the group that's going to actually vote in the primary election, and that's who's going to determine whether if you win the primary, you'll be fine in the general. So it's just a math game. But I'm like, I don't want an entire Congress that's captive to 19% of their voters. I want a Congress that's captive to 51% of their voters. And the model of election that gets you there is like an open primary with a ranked choice voting election. Like that's just mathematically that's true. Like that's how you actually just alter the incentive structure and get beyond sort of like party loyalty tests.
And they could be captive. Not, I mean, captive is the wrong word. They could be serving 51% of their voters or whatever percentage they got, but they could also be serving at times the other 49% or any portion of it,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
They could, there are, we like, you know, we talk about a lot of policies that have really, and in gun violence prevention, 85% of people want background checks on all gun sales. 85% of Americans. How does that
Yeah,
not happen, right? Like
right.
there's politics in it, right? But like it's somehow beholden to that 15%. But like there's issues out there where even if you only get elected by 51%, you can actually pick those topics that were like 90, 80, 70% of your constituents want something, and you can advocate for those, whether one part or the other is sitting on it or not. All right, so the last thing I want to talk about is moving beyond the theoretical, moving beyond the long term future, like really really short term, right here between now and November. Um, let's talk about some of these races. I think if they're all veterans, I think there's a question as to what makes that special. And I think the other question is how does the math work out? And I'd love to compare and contrast what's happened with Idaho and Nebraska and what may or may not happen in Montana, and understand how that's going to change the outlook, but also understand like who's rooting for this, right? Like
Yeah,
you
yeah.
are from a larger I want America to work and the political science says this, but like when we come to the politicals and the people who do, put on a t-shirt and attend a convention, who's rooting for what here?
I mean, let me just like own that I have a very perverse hope in elections, which is like that whoever gets elected represents the majority of their people. Like that is truly my hope. Like I hope that like in
Wouldn't
Texas,
that
it's
be weird?
like it's not even about. I'm like I want a strong Republican to win in Republican states, but I want them to feel beholden to the majority interest, not the small partisan. Like to me, it's a math game. It's like I want them beholden to the state's writ large interest and to feel a sense of responsibility for that, which I think Lisa Murkowski does, and I think you know Angus King does, and I think and so I want more of that behavior. So that's like really, it's like it's not about like let's game this for Democratic gain or gain. I wish, and honestly, this is like my regret in looking at this map, and I'll answer your question about veterans, but I wish there was a few of these kind of strategies happening in Democratic states. I wish that there was a strategy for independent, and I'm not seeing it yet. And so I wish that there was like independents running blue states and like, with the Republican Party staying down. Because I'd like to see, because what the risk is in these five instances is like, it looks like a Democratic Trojan horse, and it really is not. But it's unfortunate that we don't have the Republican equivalent strategy happening in certain states as well, because I think would be effective and I think it would be healthy. Why these veterans? I mean, first of all, I know several. Like I know, Seth Bodnar, Todd Achilles, Brian Bangs. They're just like high integrity people who are not building a career model rooted in the Democratic Party. Like they just are not. Like I think it's like if they lose, they have options. And I joke that I'm like my litmus test for politicians. Here's my 3-part litmus test. Number one, would I trust you to babysit my child? Which is actually kind of like a interesting and like alarmingly high bar, because I'm like there's certain politicians, not because I think you're like abuse my child, but like I think you might be too self-interested. Like you'll be tweeting the whole time instead of like looking at the
Right.
fact that like he's hungry and like needs a snack, or you wouldn't like you have no basic functioning as a like you have no empathy, like you're not like think about the
The
elected
amount of
officials.
people that just I got ruled out in my head from that one test was
And
actually quite
for
scary.
different reasons. So number one, I'm like, could you like babysit my kid for like an hour and like would that feel okay? Like that's one. Number two is could you like manage a FedEx Kinkos and not get fired because you're just like inflammatory and hostile and like an abject, asshole. Like that's my second. And then the third is like, and this is like the higher bar, is like, are you willing to lose an election? Like, and like, if you're not willing to lose an election, like, why are you there? Like, you're there not for issues, you're there for your own like career. So I think these veterans all pass that test for me because they have done legitimate things. They've achieved like real world success outside of this political game. I would trust them to babysit my kid for an hour. I know that they would not get fired in a professional context, and I know that they would take a hard vote and lose and be like whole human and okay with that. Like you're not any 80-year-old serving in Congress. Like I would just venture to guess, like you have made this about yourself more than you have made it about service. Like it just is like there's just no reason to believe that you can't pass the torch and that someone else can't step in and lead. Like it is just an absurd like ego play to like not just move on and like be okay. Like actually I can do other things, like spend time with my grandchildren, like walk in the national parks, like enjoy a FIFA game. So those are my litmus tests. The veterans I know running these races, like I know them personally and like they meet that criterion. I don't know the other candidates, maybe they do too, but um we're in a season where if you haven't done something innovative, I don't think you can possibly be part of the solution that America is begging for. And I think we're living in this duopoly structure. If you're not part of an innovation solution, I think you're part of the problem. And I think that's just like, that's the standard I'm holding. And I think these veterans are like, it's not surprising to me that veterans would sort of take the mantle and be like, yeah, let's go take some risks. Like, this isn't scary. Like, okay, like I might lose an election. Like, that's not like trying to traverse the Straits of Hormuz, which is a white knuckle exercise that involves risk of death. You know, it's like, this is not that. This is like American politics. Like, come on, guys. Like, this is a joke. Let's clean this
Should
up.
be in it for the right reasons.
Yeah.
All right, last question, and I want to wrap, which is very specific to Montana, because we have two veterans. We have the veteran who's a Democrat, um, Alani Bankhead,
Mm-hmm.
and we have the veteran who is an independent, uh, Seth. Help me out.
Bodner.
Bodner, thank you,
Yeah.
Seth Bodner.
Seth Bodner.
And from everything that you just told me, Seth Bodner sounds like he's a great dude. He sounds like he's in it for the right reasons. He sounds like he'll represent Montana well. Sounds like he'll pass your 3 litmus tests. And that if every voter in Montana was properly informed, if every voter could spend some time with all 3 candidates, yes, there would be people that would choose the Republican candidate, people choose the Democratic candidate, but the majority of Montanans would probably move towards Seth Bodner. However, we know the political reality is, or the electoral reality, is that most likely won't happen. That if Bankhead doesn't drop out of the race, probably before the ballots are printed, then there are so
Yeah.
many
August
people
10th.
who just grab a ballot
Next week.
and they just mark D or they mark R. But in this case, it matters the ones who mark D without doing their homework, without knowing who anybody is, without getting to know who Seth is and why Seth would be a good senator for them. Am I right in saying that is more or less where we are as a country? That we have so many. I don't want to be denigrating, but uninformed voters, party specific voters. We have conditioned people to that, and that means that not only does the independent have to be the Captain America super candidate that's going to do everything right, the Boy Scout, the perfect gentleman, whatever, or gentle lady, that person also has to play all of the political games and figure out how to weasel into a system that is set up for them to lose.
Yeah.
And that will probably happen in Montana, but for a change in the names on the ballot, right?
Yep. Yeah, no, I mean, like, so the dilemma in Montana, there's a great quote from Adlai Stevenson, who's running for president, and I'm going to get this wrong. It's sort of a famous anecdote in political circles, but like, supporter comes in and was like, Adlai Stevenson, like, any thinking person, of course, would want you. And he's like, and that's my problem. Because a thinking person won't get you to the majority of votes in this country because people kind of like do the efficiency hack of like, I don't know what's going on. It's the D, I'm the D, right? Like I know I'm more D than R, and I don't really know enough about the independent. So I don't know the Democratic women in the race. I never want to tell any candidate to get out. I don't think that's actually the right answer. But what I would say is you're forced to get into that gamesmanship because you don't have a ranked choice voting election. Like then it does become this whole spoiler conversation, but it's like you don't have to worry about spoilers if you can have multiple people on the ballot and rank your preferences. Like then you don't have this phenomenon, right? So I'm not sitting here saying like she needs to get out to consolidate votes. Like that's what the Democratic Party machine is going to say. I don't.
Because then you're just replacing the duopoly. It's just a different
Yeah, and
duopoly.
that's not where
Right.
I'm at.
Yeah.
I'm like, look, I
Yeah.
want every candidate to run. I want every voter to have multiple choices. I'm not saying she should stay and get out. What I am saying is, I mean, there's a lot of polling. There's gonna be a lot of pressure on her to do one or the other, whatever. What I am saying is like, we're watching in real time voters want something that they will not be able to get because they're going to be forced into this like strategic voting mindset. Like every Democrat's going to have to then be like, who's informed on this is to be like, I don't know if like voting for Seth is like a throwaway vote or voting for her. Like no vote. Here's my point. No voter should have to be thinking, am I wasting my vote? If you're thinking that, it's because you have a poorly designed electoral model. And unfortunately, that is what people are living with in 48 states in this country. They're not living with that in Alaska. They get to go and be like, yeah, actually, like Lisa McCoskey first. I kind of like this guy second. I kind of like this independent. She seems interesting. Like this, like they don't have that kind of forced reality. So I don't know. I don't know if she'll stay in or get out. I think she has till next week to decide that. But the answer to here's what I do want to say: if she doesn't get out and the race then goes to the Republican, the Democratic Party will undoubtedly create the postmortem of, and this is why you shouldn't have independents running. Or it'll
Right.
be, and this is why she should have gotten out. And it's like, that's actually not the point. The point is, why don't we have an electoral model that can honestly express what voters want? And the
So
answer is like Alaska does. You could too. By the way, Montana, you had this on the ballot last cycle as a reform initiative, and it didn't pass. And
and then who opposed it? Both establishment parties
both
oppose
establishment
this
parties
because they feel
opposed
like
it.
they'll lose their own control. That's
Exactly.
so if she were to drop out in Montana, that feels like the win for the Democrats because they feel like, well, now we can elect the person who's not the Republican, which when we can't elect our own, we can it's the lesser of two evils, if you will. And then but the win for election reform is keeping all three in the race, but having the independent cream rises to the top, actually come through and win that election, maybe in a surprise. So that's super interesting. Something we'll definitely be watching. I'm going to end by telling you that today I mentioned I come from my dad's office here, which is in Bloomington, Illinois, where I was born and raised. Also, someone else was born and raised here, a man named Adlai E. Stevenson II, who you just quoted. So I pulled up his quote. He's buried in Evergreen Cemetery,
Oh
a
my
couple
god.
miles that way.
Okay.
But his quote was, um, he said, someone said to him, every thinking person in America will be voting for you. Stevenson replied, I'm afraid that won't do. I need a majority.
I butchered it, but that's so much better.
Yeah, that's great. And it does summarize what we're talking about, the cynicism, but also it tells us that there's hope here and that we can make some
This
changes and
is
have some
like
hope.
so
And let's see what happens. Let's
the
see how many
dam
independents get elected.
the dam's gonna break. People are gonna watch this. Like the pent up demand is there. Just something's got to break through. That's why I'm like, it's a season of experimentation. If you're a VC in democracy, you'd be throwing 100 bets into like startup strategies that seem interesting. By the way, let me leave with this last one too. Independent mayor, former Republican of Indianapolis, running for Secretary of State in Indiana as an independent. If he gets 10, I believe it's 10% of the vote per their state constitution, he can then form a state-based party the next election cycle. So,
Interesting.
according to sort of insiders, he's not even playing to necessarily win. He might win. He's running against
Trying to
Bo
start a third
Bai, who's a
party.
Democrat, who's the son of former Senator Evan Bai. But he's like, if we can kind of crack the code on this one race, Secretary of State, because that's where the Constitution pegs it, we can build a new party. So there's that. There's like I could have like 20 other things to share that are like interesting attempts to break beyond the duopoly. They're not, most of them are not going to work. A couple will, and it's going to change everything. So stay hopeful, buddy.
Okay. Let's change everything. Let's break the duopoly.
We can talk about
Let's get
FIFA next time.
let's get some more veterans into the United States
Yeah,
Senate,
that'll be the story when it's all said
no
and
matter
done.
what their party is too.
Veterans
That's
were
something
doing
I'd like to
something that
see.
we weren't even noticing. It was veterans that
Yeah.
got us out of this mess. I would love
Oh,
that
man.
story.
All right. Until next time.
All right,
Thanks,
brother.
buddy.
See you, bye.